Now, before I begin this video, I understand that all we know right now about Fallout is what has been leaked by anonymous leakers. However, if these leaks are to be believed, which I'm not saying they are, but if they are to be believed, then I am genuinely concerned for the state of Fallout at the moment and whether or not it is dead after this latest installation. Now, the reason why I say that is because leakers have supposedly leaked that Fallout 76 is going to be turned into a online multiplayer RPG that is inspired by games like DayZ and Rust. Now, I'm not saying that games like this are bad. I think that DayZ and Rust, I've never played them, but I've heard a lot of people say that they're good games, and I'm going to take their word for it. I think that these games are actually good games. However, they're not Fallout games for a reason. When Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 came out, they weren't made to be online games. That wasn't even in the thought process. Now, a lot of that was because online games weren't really a thing back in the day, and if they were, they definitely weren't included in huge open worlds with RPG elements and stuff like that. However, back in the day when Fallout 1 and 2 were created, they were created to be role-playing single-player games, not multiplayer games. Now, that's not to say that Fallout could never be a multiplayer game, and that a multiplayer version of Fallout would immediately be bad. But that's just to say that a Fallout game being multiplayer puts it on a very puts it on a very tight rope as it is. And right now, there's very little room for error for Fallout 76. Now, on top of the fact that there's very little room for error, I have no faith that Bethesda actually is capable of creating a good multiplayer game because I've never seen it before. Now, obviously, Bethesda's made some really good games. Skyrim, Fallout 3, Fallout 4 was decent too. So I have respect for Bethesda as a company. However, I don't really have respect for them as a multiplayer developer yet. And in order to take the Fallout franchise, a very respected and very important franchise to gaming, it's obvious that after Fallout 76 comes out, it'll be the most anticipated game. So it's clear that Fallout is a very important franchise. And the fact that Bethesda is experimenting with it like they are right now, it sort of scares me. I wish that they would go back and make a normal Fallout game that is in line with something like Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 2, Fallout 1, or even a little bit of Fallout 3. That game also has a little bit of RPG role-playing elements that Fallout 1 and 2 shared. Now, I'm not saying the multiplayer Fallout game would automatically be bad. There are things that could make a multiplayer Fallout game good. However, it would involve more co-op gameplay and less of a true, like, DayZ/Rust style game where there's a lot of different characters. Right now, what I think is going to happen is there's going to be 500 other multiplayer characters, and you all go out and build and share the wasteland together. And I don't think that that is just very good for Fallout. Fallout is all about exploring the post-war world and exploring the post-war politics of the region. In Fallout 1, we saw factions like how the followers of the apocalypse were building up the Boneyard, or how the Brotherhood of Steel were building up the wasteland and how they wouldn't allow people in, and how the Master had this huge idea for the wasteland. In Fallout 2, we saw this, but it was expanded. We saw groups like the Enclave. We saw group. I haven't played Fallout 2, so I can't say a lot. However, I know the Enclave had a factor. I know that the Brotherhood was in it, and I know that the NCR was in it. All these groups, all these post-war groups that want to rebuild the wasteland. This made Fallout 1 and 2 very interesting. And Fallout 3 sort of went with the similar thing with the Brotherhood of Steel being in it and the Enclave being in it. They both had different ways that they wanted to rebuild the wasteland, but only one of them could. Fallout New Vegas took this and ran with it. That's why Fallout New Vegas is, in my opinion, my favorite game of all time, because it does this in such an amazing way. We get to see the world unfold with the NCR and Caesar's Legion, and how they have this conflict over Hoover Dam, and it evolves into something brand new. That's what makes Fallout New Vegas special. Now, Fallout New Vegas, or Fallout 4, sort of went away from this. However, it still has that sort of Brotherhood, Institute, Railroad thing, how they all have different ideas on synths, and they all want their own version of the post-war. They all want to rebuild the world in their own way. However, Fallout 76 with multiplayer, I don't see that happening. I don't see how multiple different characters could rebuild the world in their own way if they're both controlled by humans. A multiplayer Fallout game just doesn't seem like it would go back to the roots of Fallout. Now, I said earlier how there is potential for a Fallout multiplayer game to be good. However, that Fallout multiplayer game would mostly rely on things like co-op, to where you could play as each other's companions, sort of, to where each of you could have your own backstory, but that's it. It doesn't really have a full-on Rust or Daisy style game. I don't see how that could work. What I'm really concerned about with Fallout is how they're taking steps in the wrong direction. When Fallout 4 came out, it came out to originally really good reviews, but as people played it, they realized that it had a lack of role playing, a lack of world building, and a lack of things that make Fallout Fallout. And so the community asked for the next Fallout installation to have these things put back into it, to be more like Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 2 and 1, and less like Fallout 4. However, it seems like Bethesda is taking that, and instead of doubling down on it like they should have, they are going in the wrong direction and going towards a multiplayer style game. That's not really what we want for Fallout. What we want for Fallout is to go back to Fallout New Vegas, to explore Fallout New Vegas, but not in New Vegas, but in a different section of the world. I can imagine a Fallout Chicago where we have a group of people that is fighting around this enclave base that is there and the technology that they have. I can imagine a Fallout Texas where you have remnants of Caesar's Legion fighting up against an up and coming force like the NCR, the Brotherhood maybe from the East Coast pushing out. I can imagine a game set in the Midwest where you have the raging like outward expansion of the NCR versus the fight that the Brotherhood has in the West or the East. I'm sorry, the huge standing force that the Brotherhood has in the East. I can imagine any of these games where groups of people have their post-war politics and they're fighting against each other. However, Fallout 76, I just don't see that happening, especially considering one, it happens right after the bombs drop, which isn't necessarily something that is bad, but it is something that makes it so where there aren't these big groups fighting against each other, which again isn't a bad thing, but it's a new thing, and that's not something that I'm not against new things coming into Fallout. I'm just scared of new things coming into Fallout, and I get really anxious when people take new directions that could not turn out and end up blowing up in their face, especially with Bethesda, who hasn't really made that great Fallout game. I mean, Fallout 3 was really good. I'd say 7 out of 10. And Fallout 4 was probably 6.5, 7 out of 10. However, Fallout New Vegas was 11 out of 10. And Fallout 2, from what I've heard from some people, they say it's the best computer game of all time. Fallout 1 wasn't the biggest game ever, but it was still a really good game. I'd say 8 out of 10. So, Bethesda, they have made good games, but they really haven't made great Fallout games. I'm talking about Fallout games in particular. I haven't played Skyrim before. What I'm trying to get at on all of this is I hope Bethesda isn't taking a step backwards. I hope they're taking a step forward and trying to innovate while staying with the Fallout idea and staying with the fact of what Fallout is, instead of taking a step in the wrong direction. They're taking a forward step in the right direction. Anyways, thank you for watching. I'm Arnold, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy Fallout 76 as well. I hope I do too. Thanks for watching. I guess we'll find out in 2 weeks from now when Bethesda has their E3 showcase, and I'll see you guys then.